Welcome one and all to Let's Play Neutopia for the TurboGrafx 16-bit. So, you may be asking, Ken, what the hell is Neutopia? What the hell is a TurboGrafx 16? Why are you coming out of your hiatus to play a game 90% of us have never even heard of? Well, my guys, I figured, getting back into the swing of things, I'd start with something that isn't too terribly difficult to get myself back into playing. I wanted to do something that's a bit more on the simple side, but at the same time, I wanted to play something that would definitely throw off and subvert expectations, if you will. I didn't steal that from Last Jedi, I swear. So, yeah, this game, I have a bit of interesting history with it, and the TurboGrafx 16's history is just as interesting, and I can't wait to discuss all of this with you as we progress through the entirety of this playthrough. So the story is pretty simple, nothing worth really writing home about. You have your villain, he captures a princess, the hero comes along to see what the fuck has happened, and yeah, that's all you really need to know. I like how the game wastes no time establishing what you need to, like, go after within the first 30 seconds of the game, you know? So, anywho, this lady here is going to give us the spill of, what the fuck's actually going on and what we need to be doing. 8 medallions, huh? That's pretty vague, honestly. Like, you figured they'd be some kind of benevolent power, but no, it's just kind of a symbol of peace. But it's important to them, so why the hell not? Might as well get them back anyway, right? Of course he's our father's archenemy. He's a big, bad, evil villain dude in the world of fantasy and magic. The forces of goodness. Okay. If that wasn't generic terminology, I don't know how else I would describe it. Labyrinths. Using a compass to direct us to the medallions. The power and wisdom. And love? That sounds like they dodged a bullet. So yeah, based off the movement, based off the overhead view, based off the fact that our character wields a sword and a shield, and he swings this sword very, specifically, I might add. Yeah, this game is a glorified Zelda clone. And this game really doesn't shy away from that concept in any, like, capacity. This game is a straight-up Zelda clone. But for a 16-bit console, like, you're going to be seeing a lot of similarities with the dungeon design, the kinds of monsters we'll be fighting, the kind of items we'll be getting, how we progress and obtain things. This game, it is literally, by the numbers, a Zelda 1 clone. But I'm not here to write the game off for being a Zelda 1 clone. I don't think I can really, like, sweep the game under the rug for that fact. It's all about the execution, I think, and whether or not the game is fun by the end of the day. And, yeah, this game definitely has its own share of technical problems that I'll be bitching about later on in the playthrough, but I actually quite like Neutopia. In fact, I'd say this is kind of how I would design a Zelda 1-esque game if I wanted to have it appeal to a modern audience. Like, I've already done a Zelda 1 playthrough on the channel, and you can go look that up if you want my valid criticisms of the game, but the TLDR version of it is that, I don't think Zelda 1 holds up well for a modern audience because everything's, like, stupidly well hidden to the point of where sometimes you kind of need a straight up guide to figure out where the fuck you're going. Like, sometimes you can find an important dungeon under some random rock in the overworld, and that's just the kind of game Zelda 1 is, and, you know, the sense of direction certainly didn't help things either. So, we're going to be picking up a few items to help us get things started here. We got some boom bombs, we got a potion. These are all important things we're going to need to be holding on to make the journey that much easier. And we need to basically go about the overworld and find labyrinths or dungeons in the traditional Zelda sense, as you would. So, one thing I like about Neutopia and how it's structured is that, like, it's not like Zelda 1 where all of the dungeons are spread out in one overworld. Utopia is actually designed a bit differently, where the game consists of 4 separate overworlds, and of those 4 overworlds, we have to find 2 of the dungeons that reside within it. And you could complain and say that, oh, well, this makes the game way less linear, and it makes it super fucking non-linear, and I don't think that's 100% true. Like, you can still scout out these dungeons in whatever order you desire, for the most part, provided you find some kind of item that would benefit you if you find it within the overworld. I mean, heck, the items you get in the dungeons aren't even necessarily required to beat the game outside of the very last dungeon, so to speak. And we'll be getting into why that is as we make our way into the first dungeon. So, one thing I really like that Zelda doesn't is that we have a compass, and while we have NPCs that kind of guide us to where the general whereabouts of a dungeon may be, the compass here actually directs us to a dungeon, and it does this in a linear-ish order. Like, yeah, the game still kind of expects you to go to a dungeon in whatever order it wants you to go through, the whole 9 yards, basically. And of course, you can stray away from that if you please. But the game does give mercy onto the player by actually kind of like steering them in the right direction. It kind of reminds me of Metroid Fusion. Like, it gives you a general idea of where to go, but it doesn't tell you how to get there. And that's really up to the player to find out. And it never really feels like you're walking a linear path either as you're making your way over to a dungeon. Everything is kind of segmented into different paths and multiple branching pathways. You definitely want to be on guard and pay attention to everything around you and set up little checkpoints as you go. So the TurboGrafx 16, let's talk about that for a little bit. So the TurboGrafx 16 was meant to be a console that rivaled Nintendo and Sega. Most people don't know this because the game console itself was marketed poorly. I never owned one personally, and I didn't even know about this game at all until the Virtual Console had launched on the original Wii. That's actually what I'm playing this game on. To be fair, and I'm going to be playing Neutopia 2 on it as well. But TurboGrafx 16 was meant to compete alongside the SNES and the Sega Genesis, and it actually came out around the same time the Genesis did, meaning that this console, and game for that matter, predates the SNES by like a year or two. Meaning you can kind of see a little bit of the NES-ish qualities in this game that, you know, some of these things weren't entirely fleshed out until the SNES came along and was like, we're going to supercharge and power up all of these games and make them all modern-esque and awesome and kick-ass and all of these little things that I can't really script out inside of my head because I'm not exactly what you'd call an intelligent person, but, yeah, the TurboGrafx 16 did not hold up well, especially once the SNES came out, and that isn't to say the TurboGrafx isn't without some quality games. Like, I know some of the best hits on the console are definitely some of the Bomberman games and, the Yes remakes. I've never played Yes personally, but I've watched playthroughs of Yes, and it looks like my kind of game personally. And I've always wanted to get 8 on the Switch, but I've never really bothered to like put in the time to do so. But here's one thing that I like about this game over Zelda 1. They actually mark spots where you can bomb. I never liked how in Zelda 1 you had to like go around the overworld and bomb in these random non-highlighted areas just to find secrets. And if it weren't for me having a guide back then, I probably wouldn't have found 90% of them, to be honest with you. So yeah. Not all of these houses host items, of course. You have your own fair share of hints, which I'm going to be providing as we go anyway. So don't you worry your little twosome feet about that. Don't you be leaving this video now. So we're going to check this house out right now. And this guy is kind of giving us some insight as to how to expect how a dungeon works out as we progress through it. So, of course, much like Zelda 1, apart from the dungeon items, you have stuff like your maps and your compasses to look out for. But in this game, it does it a little bit differently. We have a crystal ball that more or less gives us the entire layout of the dungeon the moment we grab a hold of it, and we also have a big key. Dungeons do not have singular keys. Instead, you have to find one big key to make it to the boss. And remember, this game came out before Link to the Past. So even this game has a fair share of its own ideas that predate some of the things that later Zelda games did before the other Zelda games actually got around to doing said things. And this game is kind enough to have a save system, and we're going to be taking advantage of that right away. I'm going to use Neutopia for it, because why not? And these are your checkpoints for whenever you die as well. So if you end up dying, not only do you lose half of your gold, which sucks, you will start back in these little areas right here. At least you have a checkpoint. At least it's not like Zelda 1 where you always have to start in a very specific part of the overworld every time you get a game over, because that's never fun at all. And we're gonna see what this guy has for us. Okay, cool. I definitely needed that for sure. And to the right, we have our first dungeon. Let's go ahead and check it out. Alright, so welcome to level 1, and much like the Zelda 1 dungeons, at least the first quest anyway, you can actually cheese a lot of these dungeons using bombs. This game probably rewards the player for going out of their way to bomb walls more than Zelda 1 does, because it just feels like at almost every conceivable wall, there's at least some kind of secret hidden behind it, whether it's more bombs or potions or even a straight up shortcut. And this game loves to do that a lot. And I'm not going to hesitate to take advantage of that whatsoever. In fact, I think we've got one of our first major items coming up right here. So yeah, if you can't already tell, these dungeons have a very Zelda 1-esque feel. They're very box-shaped. They have kind of this preset sort of design that applies to like a majority of the rooms you run into across the game, and it admittedly gets a little bit repetitive, especially as far as the enemy variety is concerned, because if there's one thing I can praise Zelda 1 for over Neutopia, I think the enemy design in Neutopia is very much lacking. Like, you have mostly guys that either shoot projectiles, they fly, maybe they hop, or they just kind of move around the room however they please. And it's kind of like that for most of the game, if I had to be honest. And it gets kind of boring very fast, at least for the first few dungeons or so. So we got the crystal ball, and we're gonna use that to check out the layout of the dungeon. And of course, we have the crystal ball, the big key, and the dungeon item to look out for before heading over to the boss and kicking his ass. So we're gonna be checking out this room right here to see if we can get anything out of it. These bats just love to do whatever they please, and we're not gonna give them the benefit of a doubt now, are we? And wow, okay. Just a minute in, and we've already found the big key. That's pretty awesome, actually. That's pretty damn awesome. So, I'm gonna check out this area up here now that we've gotten these left and right sections out of the way. And yeah, this dungeon's pretty straightforward. Like, you have your branching paths, sure. But like, the moment you explore like the left and right sections of them, you basically got the general gist of the dungeon, and then you just kind of move forward once you're done. Alright. Get over here, you. I do like how they add some little bits of personality to these enemies as you strike them, though, because if you can already notice, like, as soon as we started approaching him, he started speeding up a little bit. And I know it doesn't sound like much in the long run, but, well, I'll give this game credit where it's due. Over Zelda 1, anyway. So, now we have the bronze armor. We're not even, like, halfway into the first dungeon, and we've already gotten our first armor upgrade. Rest in peace, starting armor upgrade. So, yeah. All of the dungeon items you get in this game, minus the last dungeon, they're all armor, sword, and shield upgrades, which... It kind of reminds me of Link Between Worlds to some degree, because in that game, you didn't really have dungeon items per se, at least not to the extent of where they helped you make further progress within said dungeon, but rather they're little trinkets that actually upgrade your offense or defense, and Neutopia very much follows that same line of logic, for sure. And there's a part of me that feels mixed about this. Like, for one, I'd appreciate if we had more usable weapons in our arsenal, but I also like the whole RPG aspect of getting more offense and defense, and it being something that's very presentable and optional in whatever dungeon you're in. So it's never something you have to absolutely go out of your way for, and it's something you could easily make a challenge run out of too, now that I think about it. And there are a lot of sword and shield upgrades. I think there's like a grand total of 4 to be exact for each, and it's a little bit overbearing, I won't lie. I don't think the game needed that many upgrades, to be fair, but Neutopia can do whatever it pleases, I suppose. So up there is our first boss, and unfortunately for us, we actually have to get rid of these guys first before we can actually make our headway into the boss chamber. Despite us already having the key, it's a little bit nonsensical, I know. So anywho, this is our first boss. I didn't really bother to look up and research the name of all of these bosses, but I'm just gonna call this guy Dragon Buddy for the sake of it. And it's a basic tutorial boss. You want to land as many hits as you can, as he's on the defense, and move away whenever you can, once you get a feel of whenever he's going to start throwing fireballs. And that's basically this boss in a nutshell. Hit and run. And I guess you could kind of apply that to most of them to some degree. Oh god. And there we have it. And I like that I like how they don't even have like its own like celebratory chamber for the medallions. You just kind of stumble upon them in like any other chest you'd find scattered about within the dungeon or so. Use some imagination, guys. Jeez. So yeah, basically the whole general gist of it is that you have to find 2 of the medallions within within each overworld before you can progress over to the next, and you keep doing this until you eventually reach the final battle. And with each dungeon you complete, you get an extra bar of life. Kind of would have liked to have had like a heart container instead of just arbitrarily getting it for the sake of having a challenge run, but I'll take what I can get, I suppose. So next up, we're gonna head over to level 2, and since this is the first overworld, it keeps things simple and branches things off in a way where it's pretty obvious to like figure out right from the get-go where you need to go if you want to head within the general vicinity of either going towards level 1 or heading towards level 2, and we're going to be heading over to level 2 right now. So let's check out this cave and see what this guy has to offer. Oh my god. Ooh, I won't lie, I was actually kind of hesitant on this playthrough at first because I ended up having a congested throat before starting all of this, but I was like, you know what, I have a lot of this free time on my shoulders, I might as well make good use out of it, and oh my god, what is with all of these bomb drops lately? I've been getting a whole lot of those. Oh boy. Ah, nice. Got some gold. Hold on to that, because you won't be finding instances of where you can get stuff like that very easily. In fact, I would actually argue that money is not very easy to come across in this game. And while it's not quite as required as it is in Zelda 1, in the sense that, like, with Zelda 1, if you didn't have money, you couldn't buy important items like the bow and arrow, or the blue ring, or the magic shield. The extent of what you use your money on is mostly just limited to stuff like potions and bombs, but I'd like to say without a shadow of a doubt that the combat in this game is definitely much more difficult than Zelda 1 is. So holding on to those potions, I would actually consider to be pretty important in the long run. But of course, there's other secrets to look out for as well. Sometimes you'll find people who will give you items and useful like tools to help you along the way, because this wouldn't be a Zelda clone without it. And you also have upgrades such as the life meter enhancements and stuff of that nature. So let's go over some of the items we have right now, and probably one of my biggest complaints in Neutopia overall. So a lot of the items you get, I feel like, are mostly one-use items that really have no business in being one-use like they are. Like, the Wings of Return here, for example, they more or less warp you out of a dungeon and take you back to the last checkpoint you hit, but they're expendable, and you can't carry multiples of them, which I feel like sucks. But this guy, I can kind of understand. So whenever you use this thing, it kind of reminds me of the magic powder in A Link to the Past, where if you use it on screen, it turns a lot of the enemies on screen into weaker opponents. And if you happen to run into a screen with enemies you don't like, which isn't often, at least until we hit level 6, that is, yeah, feel free to throw it out. And yeah, that's about the extent of your drops. You know, those and the boom bombs and the cherries, which restore your life. But I don't know what the hell it is. What the hell is up with the cherries in this game, or just replenishing life for that matter? But I swear the RNG for the cherries is so criminally low. And that's why I encourage the use of potions in Neutopia, because it's not like Zelda 1 or most other Zelda games where you have a 70 out of 100 chance to like run into like hearts whenever you defeat an enemy. I swear, getting a cherry feels like it's a 1 out of 10 chance in this game, because I swear the cherry drops don't happen as frequently as they should. Like, you end up getting more money and boom bombs more than anything. And I appreciate the bombs, because you sure as hell need a lot of them in this game, but I definitely would have appreciated it more if they probably would have let more focus on focusing on giving us more life drops as opposed to ammunition, if that makes any sense. Especially since, again, the Wings of Return have no right being a one-use item at all. So I want to head over here first, because there is an extremely useful upgrade that we can get. Well, let's check out this cave first. Let's see what's in here. So, in case you couldn't tell, a lot of these guys are bringing mention of a tool called the Fire Wand. And they aren't kidding. The Fire Wand is arguably the most useful tool you can have in this game. Like, bar none to literally anything else you would probably get in Neutopia for sure. So, I'm gonna head over here, because I know it's within this area somewhere. Yeah, it's right here. Thank goodness, muscle memory! Awesome. Alright, so this here is the Fire Wand, and kind of like how the Boomerang is in Zelda 1, where it's basically going to be the item that you have at your side on the 2-button slot 70% of the time. That's the Fire Wand in a nutshell. This is your projectile weapon, and I think it's such a cool item, but man, it just feels like a missed opportunity, because one thing that Neutopia 2 definitely does better than the first game is weapon variety, for sure. Because the unfortunate reality of Neutopia 1 is that most of the items you run into are more so tools, as opposed to secondary items you can also use in combat. And the only item you have to use for combat, outside of boom bombs, if you want to be an asshole about it, is the Fire Wand. And granted, it has some cool uses that keeps it from getting too stale over the course of the game. In fact, the more life energy we possess over the course of the game, the stronger the fireball becomes. So it's kind of almost like the sword beam in Zelda 1 in that regard, where if you have full life, you get like sword beams or whatever, or the more heart containers you have, the better sword you can get. In this game, depending on how much vitality you have, it actually upgrades the Fire Wand to have much more powerful projectiles. And I think that's pretty cool. So this is definitely one of those items that reward the player for playing smart, for sure, because being able to hold on to all of that vitality for much better firepower, it definitely serves in the long run. And I appreciate when a game can go out of its way for rewarding the player for playing smart, as opposed to like rewarding the player for getting beat up. I never have been a big fan of that kind of design philosophy, and I'm glad a game like Neutopia can take that concept and put it on full reverse. So yeah, outside of beating dungeons, this is your main method of getting more vitality, is by finding old men throughout the overworld. And if I am not mistaken, there's usually at least one elderly guy that has this ability within each overworld. So do be sure to take note of that, because that is your only method of gaining additional vitality, and it kind of sucks. And I think there's something over here, if I am not mistaken. Yeah! That's not where I'd put a staircase game, but okay. Okay, he's telling us something we already know. Not gonna have to deal with that for now, because we've already happened to have stumbled across the old dude. The old geezer. So I'd say we're in the clear. Let's check this cave out. Okay, so he's telling us about the ring that we just ran into. So we've more or less have attained everything we need to find in the overworld, so we're gonna make a straight dart into the dungeon, but not without finding our checkpoint first, for sure, because I'm probably gonna end up stopping the video there, because I've gone on, way longer than I have any right to. And granted, if the amount of items we get here feel small scale, there's definitely plenty of other tools and stuff to find once we hit the later overworlds for sure. So, do believe me, like Neutopia is filled with just as many worthwhile secrets to find in the overworld as Zelda 1 is, if not more so in some regards. At least in a more rewarding aspect anyway. As most of Zelda 1's, like, secrets were limited to, like, sword upgrades, shops, and rupee rewards, and this game goes the extra mile and gives you beneficial items you might actually need. Here we are. Okay. Yeah, let's do that. And next time on Let's Play Neutopia, we're gonna head over to the second labyrinth and take it down, so see you guys then.